Online live event. We have Mark Crilley here with us for a Q&A. He'll be answering fans' questions, and we are very excited and happy to have Mark with us, and thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Christina Richards. Thank you, Mark. I'm Christina Richards. I served as the editor for Mark's second book, Mastering Manga 2, and I also have managing editor Christy Conlon here and Sarah Alspaugh, who are also helping with the webinar. Just having a little technical difficulty here. Okay, there we go. So before we get started, I just would like to remind everybody of a couple of things. All participants are in listen-only mode, so you will be able to hear Mark, and you can type in to submit any questions for Mark at any time, but we will not be able to hear you. So make sure if you have a question or a comment that you type that into us as soon as possible. And we will also be recording this version of the event, so you will be sent a link to that as well, so you can listen to it later at any time. And if you are looking for any special offers, we actually have a really great offer for you today. We are offering 50% off of all Impact books in the Northlight shop, and that's northlightshop.com. And you just need to use the coupon code IMPACT50 when you check out, and that is good through October 27th. That's until 11:59 p.m. on the 27th, and again, that's good for 50% off all Impact books. So just a little bit about Mark Crilley before we get started, though I'm sure most of us are familiar with him. But Mark is actually the author of several graphic novels and prose books, including Akiko, Billy Click, Brody's Ghost, and he was selected for Entertainment Weekly's It List in 1998. Since then, he's spoken throughout the world at hundreds of venues, and he has become the internet sort of drawing guru. He's one of the most subscribed drawing teachers on YouTube. His videos have been viewed more than 165 million times, and his work has been featured in USA Today, CNN Headline News, New York Daily News, and Comcast On Demand. And if you would like to see more of Mark's work or learn more about Mark, you can find him at markcrilley.com. Okay, so let's get started with some questions from some of your fans here, Mark. Let's see, we will start with this was actually several people had this question, but some of your fans would like to know who your favorite artists are, both manga and traditional.
All right. Wow. Well, I have so many favorite artists from over the years, and when I was a kid, I was kind of obsessed with M.C. Escher. I don't know if any of you have seen his work, but he does these amazing sort of optical illusion type illustrations. I was also a big fan of Mad Magazine, so all of those cartoonists from back then. In more recent times, the work of Miyazaki, Hayao Miyazaki. I have a feeling that's not the last time you'll hear that name today. He's a big influence on me. And Jeff Smith, who does Bone, and Stan Sakai, who does Usagi Yojimbo. All of those have been big influences on me.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a question here from Roy. Roy would like to know what coloring tools you like best in your work.
Well, thank you, Roy, for that question. I think my main coloring tool is watercolor, although a close second maybe would be color pencil after that. People have the idea that I never use digital techniques, and that's not true because I do all of my Brody's Ghost cover art digitally in Photoshop. So yeah, I guess to tell you the truth, I'm using a variety of different coloring tools when all is said and done, and that's just because I feel like I can't get all the different effects that I want with any single medium. So I'm always sort of mixing and matching different things.
Okay, and do you ever use more than one medium in a single piece, or do you tend to stick to one medium for a specific image that you're working on?
Oh, I'm absolutely mixing media in the same piece. You know, I'll do watercolor, I'll add in some color pencil. People have seen me use white gouache to get these white highlights, and pastel also I'll mix in. And to some degree I use markers, but not as much as a lot of people do. It's kind of low down on the list in terms of tools that I use.
Okay, great. Let's see, we have another question here from Jacob. Jacob says he has trouble expressing personality in his characters through hair and facial expressions, and he wanted to know if you had any tips specifically for how to get personality across through hair or facial expressions.
Wow, well, that's a great question, Jacob. And you know, I think really for me, when I am watching an anime film or reading manga or something like that, I'm going beyond just being entertained to studying it and learning sort of the tricks of the trade from the people who do it best, right? So I might look at you know, The Incredibles, for example, is a favorite movie of mine, and I might look at a character like Edna Mode, you know, and say, well, you know, how is it that this hairstyle and these glasses and all of this stuff come together to convey this character, and what can I learn from that when I create characters of my own? So, you know, on top of that, I'd say just, you know, be patient. It's something that you develop over a period of years. Rather than just weeks or months, you know, and it's something that will come with time.
Great. We had a few different people ask this question. They wanted to know where you drew your inspiration for Brody's Ghost.
Well, you know, I think the big primary influence for Brody's Ghost is Death Note. I was, in terms of the artistic style and to a certain degree the vibe of the story. You know, I had just finished Miki Falls, which was more of a supernatural love story and had kind of a rose-tinted view of Japan, and I wanted to turn away from that and do something different. You know, I loved doing Miki Falls, but I always like to sort of challenge myself to do different things. And so, in a way, Brody's Ghost, I almost set out to do the anti-Miki Falls. You know, it's like it's not going to be so beautiful. It's not going to be romantic. It's going to be dark and gritty. It's going to be futuristic, and so yeah, all of that stuff came together to produce at least the setting of Brody's Ghost.
Gotcha. And we have a question from Brian here who asked which one of your works was the most challenging to produce, and is there one over and above the others that has given you the most satisfaction?
Wow, that's a really great question. I think in a way one of the most challenging things for me to produce is one of my least known works, and you mentioned it early on, Billy Click, which was it was only 2 novels that I did, part of this series for Random House. And that was tough because the editorial demands on the piece were pretty strict, and I had to rewrite a lot of stuff. I had to change the personality of the main character. I really had to kind of jump through hoops to get this book approved in the end, and so that was a bit of a struggle, I must admit. I suppose I learned my lesson with that one, that I had to have maybe a little more control over the project, or maybe stand up for myself a little more and say, hey, look, you know, this is my idea, and you kind of have to let me, you know, do it my way for the most part. Of course, I am always trying to be flexible and listen to the criticism of the editor to improve something, but Yeah, I think that piece was probably the toughest of them all in terms of having to change it so much just to get it done.
Right, in terms of sort of guarding that initial creative concept and getting that through to the end intact.
Right, well, I'll tell you, I mean, just as a specific example, the character's name originally was Billy Brainer, and he was going to be like a really smart kind of Jimmy Neutron type of a character. This was before, I should say, Jimmy Neutron was invented, lest anyone think I was copying. They didn't like the name Brainer, so I changed it to Billy Bugby, and they accepted that for a while, and then they told me they didn't like that name. And so finally it changed to Billy Click. So that's just a microcosm of all the different I had to make to get that project finished.
That's a great example, yeah. Okay, let's see. Pamela asked, if you were not an artist, what would you be?
Wow, that's an interesting question. You know, the only other real professional job that I had prior to doing this was teaching English in the Far East, in Taiwan and Japan. And a part of me still sort of misses that life of living overseas. So I might, you know, find some sort of job that would allow me to live in Japan again, or have some sort of adventure like that.
That makes sense. This was another question where we had several people ask the same question. How do you usually get your story ideas?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, that when I watch a movie or read a book, I'm always going beyond simply enjoying it to studying it and trying to figure out what makes it tick, you know. So I think in a way you can sort of break a story down, drill down past the sort of exterior details of it down to the sort of core idea, and then build something on top of that. I mean, if you look at Brody's Ghost, it's similar to a core idea that you find in Star Wars to a certain degree, you know, that Luke Skywalker has to undergo this training, right, from Yoda, this wise old character. So I sort of borrowed a little from that, and so Brody is being trained by Kagemura, you know, this ancient Japanese ghost. And so, you know, your goal then is not to make it too much of a rip-off, right? And so you have to alter it and sort of make it your own. But yeah, I can trace most of my story ideas back to some other story where I saw it done in some other way by somebody else, and then I thought, well, I want to do that. Only, you know, let's put Mark Crilley's spin on it and turn it around and make it something different.
Great. I know you just mentioned Star Wars. Were there any other movies specifically or TV shows that inspire you in your work? Michael asked that question.
Yeah, let me think. You know, like when I had to come up with the idea of Billy Click, for example, there was a certain amount of Men in Black. The basic story concept of that movie inspired that. Miki Falls is just filled with inspiration from Miyazaki movies, in particular Totoro, you know, where you go off into this really beautiful Japanese countryside setting. And so, in a way, Miki Falls is kind of like my love letter to Japan, to the films of Miyazaki, all of that stuff wrapped into one.
Okay, great. JoJo has, she had a comment and then a question for you. She says that she often gets overwhelmed when ideas start flowing in because she gets muddled and she doesn't know what she should draw first. So she asks how you deal with flash inspiration in terms of how you get pencil to paper in a discernible manner.
Wow, that's a really huge question. And I would say, first of all, you know, congratulations on having a multitude of ideas. You know, I mean, a lot of people struggle with having no ideas.
Sort of a nice problem to have, right?
Exactly. And I think, you know, my first project, and I would probably give you advice based on my first project, and it was called Akiko on the Planet Smoo, and it was about a little girl who goes to another planet. And I sat down to make this comic book story, and I never really knew what was going to happen next, almost from one page to the next. I was really making it up as I went along. And so there's this very spontaneous feeling to it, and I just, whatever idea popped into my head, that's what happened in the next panel, you know. And I think at the beginning of your career, that's not a bad way to go. You don't stress too much about you know, the beginning, the middle, the end. You just jump into it and let it flow. And so I would say try that, you know. Let each idea roll from one to the next, and don't worry about it being imperfect, or, you know, it may appear to be a little messy to you. Just keep moving, and as you go along, you know, it'll start to kind of come together, and it will reveal its form to you little by little. I think sometimes beginning artists want perfection from the very first page, and that can cause them to get frustrated and to abandon a project before they've really given it proper time to kind of bloom, you know. So, yeah, don't expect perfection. Don't even pursue perfection, I would say, at the start. Just jump in there and have fun with it and keep moving.
That's great advice. While we've got this slide that's up right now, we did have a couple of questions from people who were asking for tips as far as drawing creases in clothing and how you get yours to look so realistic. And I'm just looking at this young lady's dress with all these beautiful folds in it. Seems like a good time to bring that question up. Yeah.
Thank you. You know, so much of drawing comes from observing life and doing studies of actual clothing. So you could look at your self in the mirror and observe where the clothing folds come from. I can't resist putting in a little plug for Mastering Manga 1 and 2, both of which, of course, contain you know, sections devoted to clothing folds and wrinkles, and hopefully I do a good job of sort of explaining the reasons why the folds occur where they do. But there's really no replacement for just continued practice, and I would even say obsessive practice. You know, you have to really keep at it day after day. Maybe challenge yourself to do 25 drawings of clothing folds, you know, or 30 or 40 or something like that. And by the time you reach the 40th drawing, you will have learned a lot about, you know, where the clothing folds go.
Okay, great. Let's see. We have a question here from Alex. And Alex says that he has trouble visualizing poses for many of his drawings, and he wanted to know how you go about finding or choosing poses for your characters. And also, as far as proportions go, specifically for male characters, would you have any advice on that?
Yeah, you know, again, it's mainly going to come down to observing photographs, which these days you're lucky, you know, with Google image search and different things like that. You have this wealth of reference photographs to choose from that can help you see a certain pose. I think sometimes beginning artists have this unrealistic demand on themselves that they feel they need to be able to visualize the pose completely in their minds without using reference of any kind. And that really is not the case. You know, artists are always looking at photographic reference. They're looking at themselves in the mirror. You know, there may be a few gifted artists that can see all this stuff in their minds from the get-go and just draw it perfectly the first time. I am certainly not like that. I need to study real-life poses to see what these things look like, because your memory of what it looks like is not what it really looks like. And just cut yourself some slack and go ahead and use you know, internet image search of some kind to find, you know, say you want to draw someone who's sitting on the floor cross-legged. Go find a photo of and see what that looks like. Or look at yourself in the mirror sitting there cross-legged. And it's all those little details of where the lines go, only a genius could commit all that to memory.
Yeah. It's not cheating to
not at all.
reference.
Not at all. And the more realistic the illustration is that you see in a comic book or anywhere, I can guarantee you those artists have looked at photographs.
Okay, great. And let's see, Jack has asked, when you're making the setting, when you're building a setting for your story, do you design a completely connected world for your characters or your story, perhaps like even a mental or a physical map that you create, or do you reuse individual scenes as necessary, or settings as necessary? Sorry.
Well, the first part of that question, sort of like, do you really create the whole world and have sort of a map of the world and so forth? I know a lot of creative people do that, right? And The Lord of the Rings might be the first great example that pops to mind of, there's a map of the world. It's all been worked out. And I think for some people, figuring out that sort of map of their world and putting a lot of time into envisioning the world of their story is a way of unlocking their creativity. Now, I'm not really that kind of a person. I'm more focused on the characters and the story, and the world is a little bit of a backdrop. Now, I want it to be convincing. I want it to have a sense of reality to it, and so I will put time into. I guess I'm sort of well known for these hyper-detailed background illustrations that I do. So I do put some time into creating the backgrounds, but I'm not the kind of guy who draws a map of the world of the story and sort of works out all that stuff in advance. I mean, for example, Brody's Ghost, he's in this completely unnamed city, right? We never are given a name for this city. And I have no mental map of where things are. I sort of invent these places as I need them for the story. And not to say that that's the best way. That's just my way.
Just that's your way, right?
I enjoy having it as just a boundless sprawl of the city where I can have it be anything I need it to be from one book to the next.
Gotcha. Okay. We have a question here that's just come in, and it says, how do you make such great music on GarageBand? And did you start making your music first? And do you think you would ever do a GarageBand tutorial? And what are your favorite bands?
Thank you for that question, anonymous question asker. That is quite a compliment. I'm glad that you enjoy my music. It's a kind of a funny story of how I ended up making music for my videos. My earliest videos had no music of any kind in them. And I did sort of learn early on from watching some YouTube videos that you can't put copyrighted music in there. Or in those days, YouTube used to feature videos, and they had this really golden, feed of on the main page, where one video would get the spotlight basically, and was guaranteed, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of views if you got featured, right? So I knew that if I had copyrighted music of any kind, I would never get featured because YouTube did not want to get into trouble with copyright. But I did have people saying, when you're doing the time-lapse, you ought to have music. And that was when I opened up GarageBand that comes with my Macintosh, computer, and started sort of piecing things together. And I think the first big one was the 100 Manga Eyes, 100 Ways to Draw Manga Eyes. That was the first time that I started using GarageBand, and it's completely looped. I'm just pulling together pre-fabricated pieces of music, a bass line from here, and a main synthesizer riff from here, and you combine them, and you're like, hey, this actually sounds kind of professional, And over the years, I have actually, little by little, reached the point where I am kind of composing my own melodies, and I'm not just pulling together loops. And thank you for the question suggesting the idea of a YouTube tutorial. I really want to do it. I'm trying to think how to make it visually interesting, though, because it's all about the audio. And maybe I just have to give up on that idea.
Challenging, yeah.
Yeah, just let it be a boring-looking video, and let the the people who are really interested in learning how to do it just go ahead and watch this video and learn the nuts and bolts of it.
Right.
There is a certain art to it, I have to say. You have to keep at it. It's not something where you just get success immediately by dropping things into GarageBand. You do have to have a sense of adjusting volumes and all these different things, and having some musical sense to begin with to make it all work.
Makes sense, yeah. Okay. Jamie would like to know if you have ever done any abstract artwork.
Wow, Jamie, thank you. That is a really interesting question. I've done a lot of public speaking over the years. I've been asked a lot of questions over the last 10 or 15 years, and I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question. So the truth is, as I look back over my life, I think I have only made one completely abstract painting that I can recall, and I did it in college. So this would have been many years ago, back in the 80s. I did this abstract painting that was a sort of a blue background with black, bold lines, and it resembled a little bit like Chinese calligraphy almost, these black brushy lines. Except instead of being on a white background, it was on a blue background. And yeah, I think that's kind of the only abstract painting I've ever done, sadly. Although I enjoy, when I go to like art museums, a lot of people are freaked out by modern art. I find that the most interesting part of the museum a lot of times, just the wacky, freaked out stuff that you see in the modern art section. And for me, the more minimalist, the better. So people will always, almost as their example of what they can't understand about modern art, is they're like, well, it's just a big, this is just a big square with one pink dot down in the lower left-hand corner. That's not art. And for me, I'm like, this is my favorite thing in the whole world.
And that's what attracts you.
I love this piece. So there, yeah, for whatever reason, I actually enjoy that stuff.
Are you still there, Mark? Did we lose you, Mark?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thought you lost you for a minute.
I paused to have a sip of water. True confession.
Oh, no problem. Okay. We actually got quite a few questions regarding drawing hair for characters, and if you could offer any tips just as far as getting hair to look realistic, getting it to look like it's flowing, and specifically as far as drawing it when a character is posed laying on the floor.
Wow, boy, that last one is very specific, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm going to keep coming back to this idea of reference, and studying from life. Now, if you want to draw in a manga style, in a way you kind of have to step away from photo reference, and in this case you start looking at manga reference and studying the way the manga illustrators draw the hair, and in particular the lines, the type of line that they're using, the quality of line. So like if you look at a shoujo manga, sort of like girls manga that is intended for a female readership largely, I find that the hair in those panels is drawn with very loose, long, flowing lines, and so that requires, I think, almost practicing loosening up your wrist, to make those types of lines. One thing that I always try to keep in mind is to find one point, usually near the top of the head, where the hair is flowing from. And if you analyze, and this would also apply to realistic hair, photos of hair, that very often the hair is all flowing from some point at the top of the head. And so you need to sort of establish that. And so let's take that last example of the body lying on the floor. You may still have to decide that there is a single point near the top of the head where most of the hair is flowing from. Only this, in this case, because they're lying on their back, say, on the floor, then most of the lines are going to be, sort of going in a vertical direction down towards the floor. But there's still there's a system to it. It's sort of flowing from a particular point at the top of the head. But again, I would say the more that you're trying to do all of this from memory and from just your imagination, the more you're holding yourself to a kind of impossibly high standard. If indeed you want it to have a look of realism to it, go ahead and check out those photos. Look at, or in the case of manga, the published illustrations. These people can teach you everything you need to know about drawing hair.
Great. We just had a question come through from a audience member as to what is your favorite manga character that you've created?
Wow, I think
Do you have a favorite?
Well, part of me is always going to say Miki from Miki Falls. That story is quite a personal story to me in terms of how it relates to Japan. I named the character after my wife. There's a scene in Miki Falls, and apologies to anyone who hasn't read the story, but there's a scene in the first book where Miki and Hiro have this big argument. Or I don't know if argument is the right word, but they're on the roof of the school building, and there's this big sort of emotional scene with them in which Hiro basically says that he can't see her anymore ever again, And as I was writing that, before I even illustrated that, as I was writing the scene, I myself started to feel a little bit emotional about the things that Miki was having said to her by this guy. And I realized that I had come to identify with this character to the point where my feelings were being hurt almost just by imagining the rejection that she was undergoing. And I guess I reconnected with, we've all, sadly had this experience of being rejected at some point. So I sort of, my soul fused a little with Miki at that point. Now that being said, and sorry for stretching this answer out.
No, not at all.
That being said, the character of Talia in Brody's Ghost is, interesting, isn't it, that again it's a female character, is emerging as possibly the most complex character that I think I've ever created. And she is, especially in these later, I don't want to spoil anything, but in these later books of Brody's Ghost, she's surprising me, even as the guy who created her. The degree to which she is a mix of radically different attributes and character traits that I frankly have never really written before in any other character. So she has a special place in my heart as well.
Okay, great. And well, just to piggyback onto that then, we did have another question that sort of relates. We had a question from Jack who wanted to know if depending on what your mood is while you're working on your art, does that affect the outcome of your piece? And do you find that your piece you might begin a piece one way and it turns out quite differently depending on your mood as you're working on it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if the mood is necessarily what's going to play into it so much as, and this may be kind of boring, but the degree to which I'm tired or not, I think, is going to be the decisive factor. And if it's getting toward the end of the day and I'm wiped out and low energy, I am not going to produce my best work. And so I tend to really do my best stuff early in the morning. I just woke up, I've had my coffee, I've got caffeine coursing through my veins, and I'm full of energy and sort of optimism for what I can achieve in this day, and that's when I'm going to get my best work done. I suppose that's a little bit mood related. I suppose I have a better mood at that time of day.
Sure.
And in middle of the afternoon, I get that famous sinking feeling, right, with low energy, I don't think I can produce my best work at that. I know a lot of people burn the midnight oil, right, and they're working in the middle of the night. I've never really been that way, and so yeah, it's maybe time of day really is going to be the more effective thing to me, more so than mood.
Okay. And have you ever experienced or found times where you are just completely blocked? And if so, do you have any tips for fans, as far as getting unblocked?
Well, in my case, to be completely blocked is something that I haven't experienced for a while. There was a time when I wasn't coming up with any new big projects. This was years ago before I first got published. Since really my first comic got published, it's been a kind of constant stream of creating stuff for publication. And I don't know if I've fully experienced this idea of the artist's block, where you just feel uninspired or you're not getting any ideas or whatever. I think for me the equivalent is reaching a part of the story where I feel that I am not so good at executing this particular scene. So I'll give you an example from Brody's Ghost Book 4. There was this huge fight scene at the end of the book, and I was like, this is it. I'm going to deliver this amazing fight scene, and Brody's going to be, in this incredibly dynamic scene and doing flips and all this different stuff that was going to happen. And when I got to actually doing the scene, I just found that I wasn't, my talents, such as they are, do not lend themselves to creating the world's most amazing fight scenes. And I really struggled with that scene to make it even what I would say is acceptable as a fight scene, much less amazing as a fight scene. And I guess I got sort of served by that scene. I was humbled by the end of it. And not to say that I will never attempt another fight scene, but that I just sort of realized, wow, this is not my forte.
Mm-hmm.
And if I, to say what is my forte, I would probably say the dialogue scenes. That's where I feel like, all right, I'm in my element. I'm drawing these facial expressions. I'm coming up with lines of dialogue. I'm putting the camera in the right place. I'm creating pauses in speech and all these different things. I'm firing on all cylinders when I'm doing stuff like that. And that's, for me, the idea of being blocked is more struggling with a scene that I am not naturally adept at pulling off.
Okay. And I think you mentioned earlier that, back when you were first starting out, you didn't really plan your stories too much ahead of time. You just sort of started drawing and forced yourself to keep moving through it. Has that process changed for you since then as you've become more advanced? We had a question from D-Ron, and he was wondering if you plan out your stories ahead of time and how you go about developing the plots for your stories now.
Absolutely. That part of the process for me personally has probably changed the most out of anything that I do. And that idea of just winging it and making it up as I go along has completely gone out the window. And now I really do plan out the basic beats of my story. I remember reading a book that gave advice on writing screenplays. And the guy said, you got to know your ending. You got to know your ending. And before you even start writing the story, know your ending, and then work back from there. And then everything is pointing towards that ending like a torpedo, and I took that to heart. And so anytime I embark on a story, I do know the basic ending. Okay, now I don't like to work everything out in hyper detail, and this idea of typing out a script of the entire book, complete with dialogue scenes and everything, I couldn't work that way. It would just suck all the life out of the process for me if I knew every single thing before I sat down to do it. So I have it loosely planned out. Like I said, the ending, very important. The key scenes, the pivot points of the story, you need to know that. But I leave it loose enough that an idea can pop into my head. So to give a specific example, and I hope I'm not spoiling anything too much. I'll try to stay away from spoiling too much. But there's a scene in Brody's Ghost where Brody goes in and he wants to get this policeman's badge as part of some scheme that they're trying to pull off. And I knew that he was going to go into that store and that he was going to walk out with that badge by the end of it. But I had not worked out the means by which he would pay for it, assuming that such a thing would be very expensive, and we've established that Brody doesn't have a lot of dough. So, and I'll stay away from spoiling it, but there is a funny little way in which he's able to get this thing. And the way that he gets it is an idea that popped into my head as I was writing the scene. I didn't know. It involves the guy who runs the pawn shop where he gets it. I didn't know that the guy who runs the pawn shop would make this certain decision that he ends up making until I sat down to write the scene. So for me, it's sort of a combination of knowing the basics of how this scene is going to go, but not knowing the details of the little tiny pivot points within that scene. It's fun for that stuff to pop into your head at the last minute, and you're like, oh, yeah, no, that improves this scene. This makes it even better. And I could give you any number of examples of little details that came to me at the last minute like that.
Great. In your experience, how many hours a day, as a minimum, would you suggest a budding young illustrator dedicate to honing his skill?
All of them. No, I'm joking. Yeah, as many hours as you can put into it. And I suppose it's like quality of time, maybe more than length of time. So if you are sitting down, and like I said, for example, like today I'm going to learn how to draw hands, and I will not stop until I have drawn 25 hands. Not from my imaginary memory of what hands look like, but from photographs and from different, looking at my own hands and different poses and whatever. And I am going to, I'm going to dedicate myself to drawing hands today. That's quality time, and you're learning something. If I just sat and just drew whatever out of my brain for fun and drew for 10 hours, I suppose you're honing some sort of skill in terms of drawing things out of your brain, but in terms of advancing, if getting better at realism or semi-realism is your goal, having some more specific study, that you're doing, like I gave the example of drawing hands, that's going to benefit you more. I would say, in the long term than just doodling. Not that there's anything wrong with doodling. I'm not saying stop doodling. But maybe in terms of bettering yourself as an artist, don't focus so much on how many hours per day as the quality of what you're doing within those hours, and make sure that you're studying, you're learning something new, you're taking on some challenge of something that you were not able to draw before.
That's great advice. Mark, do you have a studio that you work out of, or do you draw in your home? Where do you work from?
I draw right out of my home. We just have sort of a spare bedroom, and it is very humble and messy. Basically, you would all be terribly disappointed if you. I think I want to continue the image. Whatever anyone is imagining as my studio is better than what it really looks like. That's the why
fantasy beats the reality in this case. Great. Have you ever experimented with any animation?
The closest I've come to animation is some of these YouTube videos that I did years ago that are like sort of web comics. I wonder if anyone has seen these. The only one that's really complete is this one where I did Miki and her friend Yumi in this coffee shop, and there's kind of a joke in there where I have Yumi is looking at YouTube on a laptop, looking at one of my videos and getting angry because this guy's not even Japanese. He can't teach people how to draw manga. So I sort of had one of my characters attacking me within the story. And there is a moment in there where Yumi says something like, Miki needs, like the cute guy comes into the coffee shop. I can't even remember what his name is. But this cute guy comes in, and he comes up to talk to Yumi. And Yumi says, Miki's looking for someone to help her, planning the new anime festival at school. Maybe you could help her. And I have Miki's face change from kind of calm to this very embarrassed, shocked, like, I can't believe you're saying this. And it happens kind of in a slightly animated type of mode without actually being true animation. So that's maybe the closest I've come to it. I mean, my understanding is that animation requires a crew of people, or at the very least a knowledge of software that I frankly just don't know. So that's what kind of keeps me from attempting animation, although, boy, it sure would be fun to try someday.
Okay, great. And let's see. We have a question here from Alexis who wanted to ask whether you consider your style to be more Japanese or American, or have you tried to really make it a mixture of both?
Oh, wow, that's an interesting question. Thank you, Alexis, for that one. I think it would be pretty outrageous for me to claim that I have become partially Japanese over time. It's really that's really going too far. But I can say that being with my wife being Japanese and having lived in Japan for a couple of years when I was younger, and then regularly visiting, I think once you marry into a Japanese family, you begin to get a vantage point on Japan that the casual visitor or even the long-term visitor who has not married into a Japanese family is not going to have. You have a window on the culture that can't really be acquired any other way, I don't think. And so in that sense, I have probably ingested certain Japanese ways of thinking about the world, and certainly concrete habits of, like, sort of taking the shoes off as we come in the house and eating Japanese food. And we have a kotatsu. I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but it's a table that has sort of a heater underneath it. It's like a low coffee table type of table with a heater underneath it. You put a blanket on it, and in the wintertime you sit underneath this table and it warms your feet, So that's like the most valuable piece of furniture in the house in the wintertime. I cannot imagine life without a kotatsu, Or like having a bath at night rather than a shower in the morning. I've been doing that for years. And here's a weird thing that's like a cross-culture mishmash of things. The Japanese believe that Western people eat salad at breakfast, which they are, of course, wrong to believe that, because I've never seen anyone, except for at a brunch, eat salad at breakfast time. But if you go to a Japanese morning restaurant and order a morning meal, it will be like toast and egg and maybe salad. And so, believe it or not, we adopted this tradition of having salad for breakfast in my household, and for years now I've been eating salad for breakfast, which is a strange Japanese custom that is based on them thinking that Westerners eat salad for breakfast. And in my case, we do.
That is fantastic.
So, yeah, how's that? Weird.
Great. Let's see. I wanted to get this question from Mallory to you, and we had some similar questions as well. Mallory is planning on going to college soon, and she wants to be an artist, though she's not sure what to major in. And she knows that you went to college, and she wondered what your major was and what advice you would have to offer college students who are going into the art field.
Well, I majored in art, and by that I mean fine art. So I was studying drawing, oil painting. I even had classes in sculpture and ceramics. So there was absolutely zero classes in terms of like commercial art or anything coming anywhere near to comic books or any of that stuff. That was not taught to me in college. That's all self-taught later on. But I got a solid foundation of drawing skills which I think everyone needs, no matter what style you later choose to draw in. I guess I shouldn't say everyone. I hate these blanket statements. But if you want to draw in a reasonably realistic style, I think that having that basic traditional study of, I guess I would have to say, Western style art, where you study Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Rembrandt and all of these great masters, that is a great thing to have, and that's what I did at that time in my life, and it sort of underpins everything that I do now. In terms of advice for someone going to college now, I would say, yeah, follow that. Take those basic classes, and then I don't know if you're in a position later on where they offer classes on, like, computer graphics and stuff like that. Yeah, why not jump into that? But I would make sure you get the basic drawing skills down before you move on to these more specific things. And make sure that you love it, right? I mean, like when I first went to college, I was kind of into acting, and I thought I might want to do a double major, theater and art, and I took one class in theater, and that's all it took. I knew I do not want to major in this. I love being a ham bone actor and, doing the funny voices like you hear me doing on the videos. Yeah. I like doing that kind of goofball acting, but I was not ready to be a serious actor. And that, yeah, it was valuable for me to have that lesson and say, yeah,
Sure.
This is not for me. This is not. So it's good in college to sort of figure that stuff out and make sure that you love art in the way that it's going to be taught to you, before you continue all the way through majoring in that. So, I would say maybe give yourself some time to figure that stuff out.
Okay. And Samara has asked, what do you find the hardest thing to draw? And she would also like to know if there was anything you are able to draw with your eyes closed.
Wow. Anything I can draw with my eyes closed? I have never really tried to draw with my eyes closed. I suppose I'll have to test that out. Maybe a simple smiley face. I don't know. Seems pretty tricky. I'd be doing well if I can sign my name with my eyes. And what was the first part of the question? Oh, hard to draw.
Well, what is there anything that you find difficult to draw? What is your hardest thing to draw?
Anatomy, and human anatomy is always the thing that I'm struggling with. And believe it or not, although I get praised on YouTube for my anatomy skills, I really feel that they are sadly lacking, and that I'm constantly struggling to deliver an anatomy lesson that is worthy of being learned from, in terms of creating these videos. So that's the major thing. I wonder what else. I think working in full color is always a little bit of a challenge for me, certainly with comics. I don't think I've ever done a full color comic book that looked good to me. I can do individual illustrations in color, but doing an entire comic book in color eludes me. Not to say that I could never do it, but I do struggle with it. It doesn't come naturally to me for comic book storytelling. I think I can handle color for individual illustrations, but for some reason I struggle with that when it comes to comic books.
Okay. And Ben asks if you remember what the very first manga drawing you ever made was, and if you still have it. And also, do you have an idea of how many drawings you actually went through and did before you started to consider yourself good?
Well, okay, let's start with that first one. Happily, I think I kind of do have a first manga drawing. Back when I was doing Akiko, this comic book series, that was not in a manga style at all, really, although it maybe had some hints of it here and there. I did this. I had a character named Spuckler. He was the sort of Han Solo type of space cowboy character. And I did, as a backup feature in the comic book, I'm going to say it was 24 ways to draw Spuckler. And I had like 24 squares, and in each square I had to draw him in a different style. And one of them was manga Spuckler. And so I did this drawing, and I looked. That was maybe my first time to look at published manga work and tried to emulate that style. And I had speed lines, and I did a character that looked like Spuckler except drawn in a manga style. That probably is, I think I can honestly say, the first time that I tried to draw manga style, and it's a reasonably good-looking little panel, actually. I'm happy to say, but it probably was because I was looking very closely at someone else's illustration and just modifying it to make it look like my character, Spuckler.
Sure.
I have an embarrassing memory, and I'm glad that this is gone forever. Heaven forbid that it should ever resurface, but I was doing a presentation at a school once, and someone said, "Can you draw manga style?" And this was before I had properly studied for it, and I tried to wing it, and hideous! It was terrible looking, and hopefully it's gone forever. But it was when I sat down to do Miki Falls, that's when I really gave myself a crash course in drawing in the manga style. And I think a lot of people looking at Miki Falls would say that I still had some studying left to do, because it's there are plenty of panels in that series that I would redo going back if I could. In fact, maybe the entire look of Miki might change if I were to go back and do that series a second time, which I will never do. It's 670 pages long, so once is enough.
That'd be a big undertaking.
Yeah. And then what was the other? I'm forgetting the other part of that question.
How long were you at it before you started to consider yourself good?
I always tell people, getting good at drawing is not a matter of years, but of decades. That's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'm sure I started drawing at the age of 4 or 5 or 6, like everyone else does, and then I just kept at it for years. And by the time I was 15, I was, I think I can say, pretty good. I think it took till I was 25, though, that I created my first publishable piece of work, Akiko on the Planet Smooth. So indeed, that's 20 years right there before I. Of more or less constant work before I reached what I would call a professional level. I'd say at a bare minimum 15 years of constant work. But I'm counting from the age of 5 or 6, which I think maybe a lot of people don't do for whatever reason. I think you should include that. It's all part of your journey there. But somewhere around the age of 20, it maybe is when I started to get good enough that I would say I was reaching a level that was semi-professional at least.
Okay. And did you ever think at all during that time that you would become this huge YouTube sensation and have this huge following of fans?
YouTube was a complete surprise to me. I had no idea that it was going to take off the way it did. If people go back and watch my first YouTube video, you'll see that it was very casually done. It was not even a camcorder. It was just a digital camera that my son, who was 7 at the time, showed me you could switch to video. And that's how I started shooting these videos. He was watching YouTube, my son Matthew was, and I thought this seems to be a way of maybe getting the word out about Miki Falls. And that was really all it was going to be. And I think for a lot of authors, that's kind of where it begins and ends. You make a video that's trying to hype some book that you're doing. It gets, 37 views, and then you say, well, that was a lot of work for nothing. And you give up. Well, I didn't give up. I was like, let's just I got to get the word out somehow. And I kept in. And as soon as I did one video where I was pointing the camera at my own hand, working on a drawing from Miki Falls, and it was, from, I think, the third book in the series. I was drawing Reika, the bad girl type character. That one got more views. And I was like, ooh, they like it. People like it when I draw. And I never looked back, and I kept making these videos, and I always thought, quite frankly, that some other better artist was going to come along and surpass me, or at the very least give me a lot of competition in terms of making these types of videos. But in a funny way, no other of like the big name famous professional artists that I'm aware of tried to create a channel like I was doing that was primarily built on instructional videos. And I suppose maybe I sell myself short in terms of the combined quality of coming up with the lesson, being able to execute the lesson, being able to talk at the same time, and being able to, I suppose, make the GarageBand music comes into play, because I think it enhances the experience of some of these videos. And I'd say finally being able to mix it up and not just keep doing the exact same type of video again and again and again. I think one of the keys to my success maybe was periodically throwing in something out of left field that was quite different from what I had done before, and not just resting on my laurels and continuing to do the exact same video. But yeah, I'll tell you, it's when I reached 1 million videos, I made this, or 1 million subscribers, I'm sorry, I made this video that was talking about the progress from having 10 subscribers to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000, and that really was what it felt like. Just as each milestone passed, my jaw kept hitting the floor. I just couldn't believe that it was connecting with so many people. And the international aspect, and that speaks to people who are at this webinar right now, people all over the world watching these videos. It's just mind-blowing, and I'm humbled and hugely honored by the response these videos have received.
Great. I know you covered this actually in the first question where we talked about some of your creative influences, but we have a very enthusiastic audience member here, Milan, who desperately wants to know which anime series you watch, and if you have a favorite.
Well, I'm so busy with my work these days that I'm not getting to watch any of the newer series, although the one I'm really curious about is Attack on Titan. I keep hearing about this, and I think, I got to watch this thing. Everyone's talking about it. It must be amazing. But I suppose the last thing that I was watching, and this is already a little old now, sadly, is Full Metal Alchemist. That was the one that I was watching. I was reading the manga and watching the animated series as well. Okay. And that had a certain amount of influence on what I've been doing. I guess it's hard to point to it exactly, but I suppose there's a dark side to Full Metal Alchemist. It goes to some surprisingly creepy, dark places, and of course, Brody's ghost never quite goes that far, but it does. It's as dark and creepy as I've ever gotten in this story. That's for sure. Okay. Well, and it looks like we're about ready to start wrapping up, but we'll end it with one last question. We just want to ask if you love every single day of your work. Absolutely. It's funny you should say that, because I was thinking about that today. That when you're self-employed, certain things, sometimes it feels like the cards are stacked against you a little bit in the way that our system works, in terms of you having to pay for your own health care and all these different things. Life is not easy when you're self-employed. But I was thinking to myself, well, this is the price you pay for waking up every morning and being able to draw all day, or like make a video all day. And no one is my boss, and it's just endless fun, quite honestly. Pretty cool, yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing job to have, and I'm incredibly lucky to be able to do this. I do. I love every minute of it. I love every day of it. There's pretty much no downside to it, frankly. And so, here's wishing you all out there the best of luck in pursuing a similar life, whether it be, I should say, as an illustrator or a writer or a musician or an actor or anybody doing any creative thing. I wish you all the best of luck. It truly is the best, most fulfilling kind of job to have, and I sincerely hope each and every one of you can have it someday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. And we had hundreds and hundreds of questions, so we apologize to anybody whose questions that we might not have been able to get to today. Hopefully we'll be able to convince Mark to come back and do another Q&A with us. And don't forget to check out Mark's books, Mastering Manga, his first book with Mark Crilley, and Mastering Manga 2, which has just come out and hit store shelves. You can check out previews of both books at impactbooks.com. That's impact-books.com. And as far as where you can find Mark, there's all kinds of places. You can visit his website at markcrilley.com. He has his YouTube channel at Mark Crilley. Mark Crilley at DeviantArt. You can find him on Facebook and on Twitter as well as Instagram. Mark, was there anything else you'd like to share before we close up?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for being part of this today. It was a blast. Thank you so much for watching my videos, and of course, anyone who's ever bought one of my books, I'm very much in your debt. I just greatly appreciate your support. And hey, I got another video to make tomorrow, right? Well, I got to get this thing done. So hopefully you'll all be there tomorrow, Friday, somewhere around 2 or 3 in the afternoon is usually when I'm able to unleash these things upon the world. And hopefully you'll all enjoy the one I have in store for tomorrow.
Awesome.